and move to our main talk this evening about T-levels, and with the slightly controversial title, T-levels, are they needed? And I'm delighted to welcome Rebecca George, OBE, our president this year. And thank you very much for joining us this evening, Rebecca. And I know your theme for the year has been around membership, and delighted to have you come and join us. And I think it's the first time we've had a president join us at Learning Development Specialist Groups. So very pleased to have you here this evening. Just before we start, we have a handle for this evening on Twitter. So T-levels LDSG. And if you'd like to follow the tweets that are going out. And before we start, Rebecca's asked us to just play an introductory video. So Michelle, if you'd like to take control, just play the video, that would be great.
So I'm Chloe Knowles, I go to South Downs and I do the digital T-level. So I'm doing the T-level because it's a new course, I wanted to try it out, but also because the work experience I thought was a really good idea, just to get an insight into the working world and knowing which path I want to take in the future. It's a little bit weird, you know, being the first people to do this course, but my mum and dad are really, you know, supportive and they think it's a really good idea. So I'd like to break the stigma, and I'd love to see more girls working in the computer industry because it's a very male-dominated industry at the moment, and I'd love to see more girls working there.
Okay, hope so.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this evening. You might wonder why I'm going to talk to you about T-levels, and so I thought it would be just worth giving you a couple of minutes background on me. And I should also say in the Q&A, if there's anything else you want to ask me that is or isn't about T-levels, please go ahead. So I am the non-executive chair of the T-level Reform Programme Board for the Department of Education, which is why I'm here this evening talking to you about T-levels. And I've been the chair of the programme board now for about a year. It's an extremely complicated programme, and there are lots of different organisations involved and a lot of stakeholders. And as you will hear, it's an extremely challenging environment. It's been absolutely fascinating being the chair of the programme board, and I've learned a lot. But I won't say that I'm an education specialist. So I'm absolutely sure that there are people listening to this who will know a lot more about it than me. So we may end up having more of a conversation than a Q&A at the end. For those of you that don't know, my day job is I'm a managing partner at Deloitte. I run our government and public services business across 25 countries in Europe and the Middle East. That's around about a €1 billion business. And I sit on the executive committee. I'm also on the board of the City Mental Health Alliance. So let's talk a little bit about T-levels. Let's go on to the next slide. I think Kevin's in charge of the slides. Thank you, Kevin. So what is a T-level? It's a new 2-year technical course, and I'm not going to read out everything that it says on the slide because you can read it for yourselves, but it's worth saying it's a course which is a series of courses, so there are going to be 24 in total, that have been developed in collaboration with employers, and they are a mix of classroom and industry placement. And they are intended to be an alternative to A-levels and apprentices for 16 to 19-year-olds. And an A-level, a T-level would be comparable to 3 A-levels. So they're quite technical and they're quite academic in their content, but they are designed to be an alternative. Now, why do we need them? Well, at the moment, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, but at the moment there are 12,000 courses that are available for people to take, either 16 to 19 or as adults. And those courses have, I'm trying to think of a good way of putting this, slightly run out of hand, I think is perhaps the best way of putting it. So there isn't much in the way of consistency in the way that those courses are put together, or the way that they're assessed, or the way that they are viewed by employers. They're also not available in a uniform way across the country to all learners. So there is an intention, and there will be a review of those 12,000 qualifications. In fact, the Department of Education just announced that review starting. And the intention is to slim down that portfolio, make it more consistent, make it more available on a more equal basis to people across the country, work out what to do with adults. I'm going to come back to that in a bit, but also to really home in on building more of a clear choice that leads to a quality outcome for 16 to 19-year-olds. So that's why. Let's move on. So I mentioned that there are around 24 or 25 T-levels in total. They're rolling out over a 3-year period. There are 3 that went live in September. And I would like to say, because I'm very proud of this, that they went live perfectly without any hitches, which, given the considerable challenges of COVID this year, is a huge tribute to everybody who has been involved in getting them live. So you see the first 3 there are in red. So the digital T-level is the one that I'm going to specialise talking about this evening, but education and childcare and design, surveying and planning for construction also went live. And you see the plan there for the others rolling out over the next few years. So moving on, the way that the T-levels have been put together is that each awarding body has exclusive rights to deliver each T-level. This has been an interesting process. There may be questions about this later. There were procurements run, and there are new procurements coming out now. And you can see there the organisations involved in delivering the T-level this year. So it's Pearson. Moving on. So what does the programme actually involve? Well, it's an intensive full-time programme of 1,800 hours over 2 years. And you can see here that the programmes are split into a core and then occupational specialisms. And I'm going to talk about the occupational specialisms a little bit more around the digital T-level. But as you can see on this slide, it is really important. The T-level industry placement is really important. That has been massively challenging this year. But there is also a requirement for quite high levels of English and maths. And that it kind of underlines the importance of the academic aspect of this particular qualification. So moving on, I said that I was going to just go through the occupational specialisms for the digital T-level. You see these here. And effectively, the programme is delivered in 3 parts, and each part has different specialisms, and all students will take all of them as they go through them. Sorry, all students taking each programme, each T-level, will take all of the specialisms associated with it. Apologies. Moving on. This slide just gives a further breakdown of the hours involved in the programme and how the programme is split up, but also how it's assessed. And you'll see that there's exams in a very kind of academic tradition, but there's also quite a big component of a project, which is really important because especially underlining the technical content of T-levels, and all of them have technical content, this is the opportunity for the student to demonstrate that they have actually learned those technical capabilities. And the next slide. As I said earlier, the content has involved quite a lot of input from employers and other organisations. And I'm sure you know this, but our very own Richard Lester, Programme Director of the BCS, was a member of the T-Level Digital Route Panel recruited by the Department for Education to design and develop outline content. So we've had a stake in the ground with this one, which I think is really important, and so have a number of employers. And I think that the employers have been quite vocal about this. Separately, I sit on a business advisory forum for Gavin Williamson, and there are about 8 or 9 employers who sit on that. And it's interesting to know, whatever you think about the state of education in the UK at the moment, there is a huge effort to have a much more positive, interactive dialogue between education and business. And I see that as a hugely positive thing. And particularly in the context of the large number of reforms that are going through at the moment. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But we also know, and we know this from our own profession, that we do have a shortage of people with STEM capability in the UK, and we have unequal capability for people to learn those skills across the country. So, you know, I'm really hopeful that the T-Level programme is going to help address that. If we just have a quick look at the next slide, this just covers the core content in the digital T-Level. And again, as informed by business, it's not just about technology and digital. There's also some of the core agile and adaptable capabilities that employers have said that they need for people who are making the transition from education into employment. So, for example, problem solving is really important, and understanding the business context, and also understanding security. So you can see it's a fairly holistic approach. And then the occupational specialism content on the next slide, the point of that is that you should be able to achieve a minimal level of competence. You're not supposed to end up after a T-level being a technical specialist, but you should know in a working way, you know, or something of all of the specialisms. And then the next point talks about grading, certification, UCAS points. So you can see how this, how the T-levels fit into the grading process. It's a nationally recognised qualification, and you can get a record if you don't pass all of it. So you know, it can be broken down. We talk about industry placements on the next slide. Now, this is a subject of a fair amount of discussion right now. Industry placements are really important, and the design of the T-levels is that the industry placement will be done live on site with the employer. Now, particularly with the digital T-level, a number of employers are saying right now, look, actually the reality is we haven't got people on site, and the reality is our workforces are working from home right now, and we could offer industry placements, but they would be at home rather than on site. At the moment, the Department of Education is not keen to do that. They really want people doing the industry placements to have that experience of going to the office, and I completely get that. And as the first industry placements won't be starting until next year, we're keeping our fingers crossed that we will be able to make those in-person placements happen. My personal opinion is that there's likely to be some more dialogue about this as we see the implications of COVID playing out across various sectors, but especially for people working in IT roles. And moving on, So the next slide gives a list of the types of jobs that people would be able to move on to, and bearing in mind T level is a bridge from education to the world of work. This is quite important. And then I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the context that the T levels are coming out in on the next slide. It's a really complicated landscape in education at the moment. We've got the T level program coming, but we're at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, there is this qualifications review. So there's these 12,000 qualifications which are going to be reviewed. That's just been kicked off. At the same time, there's been a consultation on higher technical education, which closed in September. And you know that there are a number of reforms going on around higher technical education, and the key driver for that is because it is considered, and I would agree, that we could be more competitive around technical education and technical careers, and we have a lot of vacancies which need to be filled. And at the same time, there's also a further education reform programme with a white paper coming out in the autumn. And I mentioned earlier that the qualifications review will also cover qualifications which are offered to adults. And I'm a huge believer in continual professional development and adult learning, both for retraining and also the upskilling. And I think that there should be partnerships between further education providers and industry to provide that. And I also think that further education has been underfunded for many years and is due for some reform. Now, separately to all of this kind of programmatic review, you'll all be very, very conscious of the fact that universities are suffering some very significant challenges with COVID. Which aren't going to go away in the short term. And so, overall, and of course, the Department for Education are running day to day the operations at schools, which brings their own challenges. So you can imagine this is an incredibly busy time for the people in the Department for Education, but also for all of the other organisations that are involved. And it is a pretty complicated stakeholder landscape, including the Institute for Apprenticeships, the major programs leadership, people in the Cabinet Office, the Treasury, plus the providers, plus employers. It's really quite complicated. It's actually also very invigorating because I think that a lot of this stuff is really good, and it's time it happened. Right, so I'm nearly finished. I've got one more slide which just gives some more information. And I'm going to turn this over now to questions. As I said earlier, you can ask me anything you like. I was really interested in Kevin's summary of the events that you did through the year, and particularly the one on music and coding. I've got 3 grade 8s, and I've always thought that there was a big link between music and coding. So I'm delighted to see that you've got a whole span of different things going on. Anyway, I'll stop talking now, and you can ask me your questions. You're on mute, Kevin.
I turned the camera on, but not the sound. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Yes, we've got some questions coming already. Just say anyone that would like to ask a question, if you can put it into the questions box on GoToWebinar, that would be great. So I'm going to start with a question from Neil Spurgeon. It says, you're right that 12,000 seems ridiculous, but very recently it's been suggested by Department for Education and Skills that the very valuable and long-standing BTECs will no longer be funded. Whilst we all like the idea of the breadth of T levels, many employers really value the quality and relevance of BTECs. BTECs are really still needed for those significant numbers of 16-year-olds who are really not ready for the difficult academic demands of the T levels. Any comments on that?
That's a view. That's a view that I'm very familiar with, and I have a huge amount of sympathy. And I think that there's a really, really important dialogue to be had about what happens to 16 to 19-year-olds who don't have the academic capability to take a T-level. The Department for Education's short answer is take an apprenticeship. And my personal view is I think that we need a more rounded answer than that. So I would urge you to get involved in the consultation around the qualifications review. There was a press announcement about it. I think it was the end of last week. So that process is just kicking off. On BTECs themselves, I don't have a view as to whether the BTEC is the right qualification. What I do think is that we need to make sure we're offering everybody with as varied academic capability as we have in the country the opportunity to take a qualification which is of value to employers. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Got two questions about geography. From Katie McCure, thanks, Rebecca, very interesting. I'm up in Aberdeen. Is this being rolled out in Scotland? And associated with that, I've also got a question. Problem, England only, so there'll still be inconsistency across the nations. So would you like to talk to how does this play out across the 4 nations?
I don't know. I should know the answer to that. I've got a feeling you're right, though. I think it might only be England. I will take that question away and find out. But I have a feeling. I think it may be England and Wales, actually. But I will. Yeah. I should know the answer to that. And I will. It's not the question I was expecting on geography, but I will find out and let you know.
And actually, we've got follow-on from Chrissy Nyson. It sounds very familiar to the foundation apprenticeship in Scotland.
Yeah, I suspect that's true. Well, but I will come back on that.
Okay. Okay. Question from Bernie Fishpool. You said that currently Pearson have the only existing digital T-level, although I know NCFE have the other 2 pathways for 2021. If the T-levels do take off as expected, will all of the boards be able to create their own qualification from the DfE outline documents?
I do not believe that is the current strategy. I've chosen my words fairly carefully there because I think we have to wait and see to a certain extent what happens in the rollout and to take up, especially when we get to scale. But for the moment, I do not believe that's the current strategy.
Okay. Actually, Katie's just sent a follow-up saying, what question were you expecting on geography?
Good. So the question I was expecting on geography was, what do you do, particularly with people who want to do a digital T-level, if there are no digital employers in the part of the country in which you live? Because you can't do a T-level without doing a placement in person. And I have a real concern that, particularly with the levelling up agenda, that there may be parts of the country where there are young people who would really love to do a technical qualification like the technical T-level, but there won't be necessarily enough employers locally to give them the work experience to do the industry placements. So this is the thing that I have been banging a drum about for the last few months. And I have also, and the BCS have been helping actually. And I think we're going to probably see a little bit more dialogue on this, because my view is I understand that ministers are not keen to have virtual placements. I understand that. But I do think we should be thinking about blended placements, particularly for digital, because I wouldn't want people who live in, remote or rural parts of the country where there aren't the opportunities not to be able to do the digital T-level because there's no local employer. That's the question I was expecting.
Yeah. So on that line, I had two questions come in before the presentation. One was, what assurances are there that small businesses will be interested in engaging with the 40-day work experience requirement? And also, some colleges and schools will not have access to the range of businesses they will need in their area to get 40 days work experience per learner. Some will be fighting for the same employers. How will the government help these people?
So to date, the business engagement has been massively positive, and the businesses that are engaging with the special are really keen. They understand why the government are producing this qualification to get to, you know, highly qualified people with technical, vocational capabilities, and they think it's a great idea. So it hasn't been a problem to date, but we've only got 3 so far. And so there is a very good and extremely comprehensive plan for both business engagement, but also support to providers going forward by the Department of Education over the next few years, to make sure that that providers do have the support that they need to get access to the businesses, and that businesses are fully up to speed with what this qualification is and how they can benefit. Now, it's early days, so we've got to see how it works. So far though, I've been really impressed, not only with the campaign for business engagement, but also there's incredibly rigorous measurement and assurance of the process and how it's going and who's engaged and exactly what outcomes they've got. It's been really impressive. So I just hope that we have a strong enough process with the strong enough foundations to scale it.
Yeah. So yeah, Christy's come back. Nobody knows how long COVID restrictions will last. Will we have simulations instead of actual work placements? The foundation, I think it's the FA scheme, the Foundation Apprenticeship Scheme in Scotland, are considering this, and it's a mess. They were very adamant that simulations were not to be used, but now there may not be a choice.
Would love to know a bit more about why it's a mess, actually. So if they want to type a bit more into the chat about why it's a mess, that would be great. As I said earlier, this is not something businesses want to do right now. They don't want to do that. They want the students to have that really hands-on, on-site, practical experience of going to an office every day, going to a business. I completely get that. I think if COVID goes on for much longer, we will have to think about how to do that. It's easier for digital than it is for either of the other 2 T levels that we've announced in September. But I'm really conscious of the fact that ministers don't want to have one thing for one T level and other things for other T levels, and you know it is complicated. But I'd love to know more about why it's a mess in Scotland. That would be really interesting.
Okay. Couple of questions here about apprenticeships. What happened to the recommendation that there should be an apprenticeship aligned with each T-level pathway? And I've got to add to that. I recently chaired the Trailblazer group for cyber technician. As one of the most needed digital skills, I haven't seen any mention of cyber in anything that's been discussed. Where did cyber go?
Okay, so I thought, I might be wrong here, but I thought cyber was in security on the list of competencies I put up on the slide. But maybe I'm being naive and it's not. You probably know more than me, to be honest,
yeah.
Kevin.
It's gone, the alignment with T-level, between apprenticeships and T-levels does seem to have gone missing.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I don't know anything about that, and so I think it's gone, and I think it's been gone a while. Otherwise, I would know about it. So what I'm saying is, I think it's been gone since before I became chair. But as I said with the previous question on Scotland and the other devolved nations, I will go away and ask that question. I think it's a. I don't know about the alignment with apprenticeships. I've never heard that as a goal, but I'll find out. But I certainly think we should have cyber technician.
Yeah.
So
the cyber technician, well, I would have thought that would have been a natural fit into the T level, but yeah. Another slightly tangential question: how do T levels fit with the Institutes of Technology?
As far as I'm aware, the Institutes of Technology are part of the qualifications review.
No, there's 12 already launched or launching, and the second wave of Institutes of Technology have just been invites have just gone out for people to to bid.
They will be able to be providers along with other providers.
Okay.
Yeah, they basically providers bid to be able to provide the course, and the Institutes of Technology can bid. One would assume they all will, but they may not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Chris has come back just on the why things didn't work out with hybrid, because nobody seems to be able to agree on anything. 1 minute we're told it's okay, and the next we're not.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right. So basically, so if you had some clarity on the policy, it may be possible to deliver something. But if you can't get clarity on the policy, then it's all pretty tricky. I agree with that.
Okay, another question. I'm aware of problems providing experiential placement where students live in one locality and placement in a different COVID-19 tier. Is there a contingency for this?
That's a good question.
And do you have funding to support students' accommodation when on placement out with commuting distance? Is this an issue for the T-level accreditor?
So this is a really, really good question. I at the moment, there isn't I'm sure there isn't a policy in place for different COVID tiers. We've only had different COVID tiers for a couple of weeks. Going forward, we're going to have to see what happens with COVID. Like I said, the first industry placements haven't started yet. On the funding for accommodation, I actually think it would be massively helpful to have some sort of funding support available for some students in specific circumstances. It's not, I don't think you need to have it for everyone all the time. But again, going back to my previous comment about geography, I do think that if you had people who really wanted to take a digital T-level but lived in a part of the country without many businesses, it would be so helpful to give them some sort of support, financial support, to be able to go and do the placement somewhere else. It's not in the plan at the moment, but something I think we should continue to discuss.
Yeah, and I think just going back to the earlier comment, the matching, if you're in particularly some of the areas in the southeast, yes, there's a lot of employers in digital, and there's a lot of potential providers or colleges if providing this. But if you get into some areas of the country, you're going to have a sparsity of employers engaging and a sparsity of students. How do you bridge that gap? It's quite clearly something that's coming up.
Particularly for digital, I do think we can help with that because we're technology. We can help with that by helping students to either travel or to do more blended. I happen to live in Somerset, and I worry a lot about the rural areas of Devon and Cornwall, but I also worry about the red wall constituencies of the north of England, where we really need to upskill large numbers of people, and there may not be the same opportunities as elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, it's different tangent. The government set out the rules for development of technical qualifications around 4 or 5 years ago. As these were beginning to work well, why is there a need to change the model? If it isn't broke, why fix it?
Before my time, and probably outside of my specialist area, to be honest, but I think that the general view is that while the qualifications may be okay, we're not actually seeing the numbers of people we need who are technically qualified for the job market in the UK, and we've got loads of vacancies. Somebody told me the other day we've got 100,000 vacancies in cyber and 100,000 vacancies in broadband.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to do something.
Yeah. Carrying down the list. But thank you for keeping up with all these questions, Rebecca, because there's a lot of questions coming in.
I'm delighted.
Many FE colleges have used digital and ICT as a way of getting young people out of a backwater and into much wider opportunities. T levels with their 40 days and detailed technical content could be a barrier. What could be done to help them?
So I think this is goes back to the question that was asked earlier about BTECs. So I do think we need to think really carefully and thoughtfully about all of the people that need to learn. And, not everybody is made the same, and people will need different offerings. And I think that is why I think the qualifications review is so important. But for me, that question also links into lifelong learning and retraining and upskilling, because I would love to think that, personally, I would absolutely love to see a lot more investment in further education and in adult learning. And I think there's a crossover here. For me, there's a crossover here between adult learning and what we offer to people from 16 to 19 who are going to do a T level. Excuse me, just need to take some water. Ask me another question.
So Elizabeth Dimbleby saying, like GCSE computing, the T level looks like an excellent academic course. However, if the BTECs are retired, there is a need for some kind of Key Stage 3, 16-year-old IT qualification for the majority of students who need to understand IT, but who cannot access the computing GCSE.
So this is for me, and this is again my personal view. This is a bit of a wider discussion. So I've been trying to talk to BCS Academy Board about digital components of non-computing science degrees, and for me, it's all part of the same question. So I think that we should have an ability to kite mark or recognise or accredit, or whatever word you want to use, digital modules which are offered as part of other qualifications. And with BCS, we should have some ability to recognise those. Now, the piece I've been talking to Academy Board about is very much around what do we do about the fact that most degrees these days have some sort of digital component in it, but they're not necessarily a computer science degree. I think this question is on the same spectrum. I definitely think we need offerings, but I also think they need to be of quality, and ideally, I would say this anyway because of the BCS, but independently accredited.
Yeah. I think this is in a similar area about the provision of computing in general, but how are teachers going to be trained for teaching T levels?
So you might know this more than me, Karen, but I think the awarding organisations are responsible for the teaching of the providers. I'm pretty certain that But that's how it's happening.
I think the broader question is, it's like teaching cyber or even teaching A-level computing. There are just not enough people. How are we going to get, if we're struggling to get them for teaching A-level computing, how are we going to get them teachers trained to teach T-level digital?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and it's a real challenge for the industry, because right now there are 28,000 FE vacancies today. Before we start reviewing the qualifications and introducing new things, and there is an estimate that we need an additional 20,000 teachers for T-level. And then you put that into the mix, and by the way, that's not just technical. That's not just the technical and the cyber ones, but you put that into the mix where you need, 50,000 more nurses and 20,000 more policemen, and all the other things. And I think we have a big challenge now. The department does have a program to upskill teachers, and we are very much part of BCS, very much part of that program. I think that more needs to be done, and I don't think that all the answers are in place. I have a huge concern that today, even in spite of our excellent track record over many years through CAS, I worry that, and I know in fact because I talk to children and friends who say they're being taught about computers on PowerPoint slides still, and we have to move off that, don't we? So it's a huge challenge. I think not all the components are in place.
Great. I would say just coming up to the top of the hour, but thank you everybody for all the questions coming in. Rebecca, I'd just like to ask you any final comments you'd like to make. I guess the title for tonight is T-levels, are they needed? After hearing some of the questions, your reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are needed. I think there's a good place for T-levels in our education system, providing that they do enable people to make that transition from education to employment, and providing that we get the context right with all of the other reforms that are going on.
And I guess I would add to that, and the teacher training issue. It's we've got to make sure that everyone is. I guess that's what I've seen from the work I've been doing in apprenticeships as well. It's like without the ability to deliver, it's really hard to get started on something.
I mean, I know that there are lots of schemes that are under consideration, and some of them have already been tried, and it's hoped that they'll be replicated like Maths Lasts. So taking people who retire from organisations and encouraging them to go into teaching. There's a lot of discussion about how to enable more part-time teaching at FE colleges by people working in industry. I think those programs are really, really helpful. If we could get, our technical people who are working for IT organisations, if we could get them to be able to deliver courses part-time in FE, I think that could be part of the answer, and it would also bring the employers closer to the students. I think we probably need more discussion about how to make that happen.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Rebecca. It's been great to have you along to the specialist group, and thank you everybody who's attended and for all the questions. I know I haven't managed to pick up on every question that's come in, but hopefully we've grouped some of these together. But I hope it's been a helpful and informative session for everybody. And as I said earlier on, this will be available on the member group's YouTube channel. Usually it takes us a day or two to post it, but if you want to go back and go back over some of the things we've covered, then it's there, or share that with anyone else that's asking about T-levels. But just like to end up with saying thank you, Rebecca. It's been great to have you, and hope and hope you enjoy the rest of your year as president.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining, and look forward to seeing you next month. And we'll be looking at the LPI Learn platform. So thank you and good evening.
Bye.